In 1983, a routine audit of United States Navy procurement records uncovered a line item for a toilet seat. The toilet seat cost $640. Not a gold-plated toilet seat, not a reinforced titanium toilet seat designed to survive a nuclear blast. A toilet seat for a P-3 Orion patrol aircraft, the kind of toilet seat that, at a hardware store in 1983, cost $11. When that story became public, it triggered congressional hearings, newspaper investigations, and a national conversation about Pentagon spending that has never fully ended. The $640 toilet seat became a symbol, a shorthand for a system so large, so complex, and so insulated from ordinary economic logic that it could spend 60 times the market rate on a piece of plastic and not notice. That was 1983. The Pentagon's annual budget today is $850 billion. Today, we are going to look at 5 things the United States military has spent that budget on that will make you stop and ask a very simple question. What exactly is going on inside the world's most expensive military institution? Number 1. A fighter jet that cannot fly in rain. The F-35 Lightning II is the most expensive weapons program in the history of human civilization. The total projected cost of the program, including development, procurement, and lifetime sustainment across all variants, is $1.7 trillion. That number is not a typo. $1.7 trillion for a single aircraft program. The F-35 was designed to replace multiple legacy aircraft across the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps simultaneously. It was supposed to be stealthy, supersonic, affordable, and maintainable. The Government Accountability Office has documented that it has achieved approximately one of those 4 objectives. For years after entering service, the F-35 had a software limitation that prevented it from firing its own cannon accurately. The internal cannon, which cost millions of dollars per aircraft to install, was unusable in combat because the targeting software was wrong. The fix took years to develop and cost additional hundreds of millions of dollars to deploy across the fleet. The aircraft also has a known vulnerability to lightning strikes that required pilots to avoid thunderstorms and maintain distance from lightning activity. For a frontline combat aircraft expected to operate in all weather conditions across every theater on Earth, the requirement to avoid rain clouds is a specification failure of a kind that is difficult to describe charitably. The Air Force continues to buy F-35s. The program continues to expand. The cost continues to grow. The contractors continue to be paid. Number 2. A camouflage pattern that made soldiers more visible. In 2004, the United States Army introduced a new universal camouflage pattern called UCP, designed to work across all environments simultaneously: desert, woodland, urban, Arctic. One pattern for every theater. The Army spent approximately $5 billion developing, testing, and fielding this pattern across the entire force. Within 2 years of its introduction in Afghanistan, soldiers in the field were reporting that the pattern was not working. Independent testing confirmed what the soldiers already knew. UCP performed worse than the older woodland and desert patterns it replaced in almost every environment it was tested in. In Afghan terrain specifically, where American forces were fighting every day, UCP made soldiers more visible to the enemy, not less. The Army acknowledged the problem. The solution was to develop a new camouflage pattern called multicam, which performed significantly better in testing. The Army then spent additional billions transitioning the entire force to the new pattern. The total cost of the failed UCP program, including the transition away from it, has been estimated at between $5 and $6 billion. For camouflage that made soldiers easier to see. Number 3. $500 million to train 50 soldiers. In 2014, the United States Department of Defense launched a program to train and equip moderate Syrian opposition fighters to combat Islamic State forces in Syria. Congress authorized $500 million for the effort. The goal was to field a force of 5,000 trained fighters within a year. General Lloyd Austin, then commander of United States Central Command, testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee in September of 2015 and was asked directly how many trained fighters the program had produced. His answer was 4 or 5, not 4 or 5,000. 4 or 5 individual fighters who were still in the field and considered active. The rest had been killed, captured, had their weapons seized by other militant groups, or had simply walked away from the program. $500 million had produced in operational terms approximately 4 to 5 soldiers. The program was officially ended 1 month after that testimony. Number 4. Billions spent on aircraft that never flew in combat. The Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor is, by most technical assessments, the most capable air superiority fighter ever built. It is faster, stealthier, and more maneuverable than any other aircraft in the world. It took decades to develop and cost approximately $67 billion for the full program. The original procurement plan called for 750 aircraft. That number was revised down, then revised down again. The final production run ended at 187 aircraft, making the per-unit cost approximately $350 million per plane. The F-22 entered service in 2005. For the first 9 years of its operational life, it was never used in combat. When it finally flew its first combat mission over Syria in 2014, it dropped bombs on targets that could have been struck by aircraft costing 1/10 as much. The F-22 also had a life support system malfunction that caused pilots to experience hypoxia or oxygen deprivation during flight. The problem persisted for years, grounded portions of the fleet, and was never fully and publicly explained. Pilots flew aircraft they knew might cause them to lose consciousness. Number 5. The program that audited itself and found $43 trillion it could not explain. In 2018, the Department of Defense completed its first-ever comprehensive financial audit. The Pentagon had never been fully audited before, not once in its history. Every other federal agency submits to regular independent auditing. The Department of Defense had been exempt from that requirement for decades, partly because its financial systems were so fragmented and incompatible with each other that a full audit was considered practically impossible. The audit confirmed that assessment. Auditors found accounting entries totaling $43 trillion in unsupported adjustments. These were not confirmed expenditures of $43 trillion. They were accounting entries made to force the books to balance, for which no underlying documentation or justification existed. The money had moved through the system, on paper, without traceable authorization. The audit also found that the Army could not account for the existence and location of a significant portion of its equipment inventory. Vehicles, weapon systems, and supplies that were listed as existing in the accounting records could not be physically located when auditors tried to verify them. The Department of Defense failed the audit. It has failed every annual audit conducted since then. Here is what I want you to take from this. These 5 stories are not evidence that the United States military is incompetent. The American military contains hundreds of thousands of extraordinarily dedicated and capable professionals who do their jobs with integrity and skill. The soldiers who wore the camouflage that did not work still fought with it. The pilots who flew the aircraft with the oxygen problem still flew. What these stories are evidence of is something structural. A procurement and budgeting system so large, so politically entangled with congressional districts and defense contractor employment, and so insulated from the competitive pressures and accountability mechanisms that constrain spending in every other sector of the economy that it can spend $1.7 trillion on a leaky jet, $5 billion on the wrong color green, and $500 million on 4 soldiers, and remain largely unreformed. Understanding that system, why it exists, how it persists, and what it would take to change it, is essential to understanding American military power honestly. That is what this channel is for. Subscribe now. The next video goes inside one of the most dramatic and consequential battles in modern American military history and examines the gap between what the movie showed you and what actually happened. Tell me in the comments, which of these 5 surprised you the most? Drop your answer below.